Hey adventurers, so today is going to be another book review. This is going to be for Tribe of the Accord by Shaun Michael Stone. Yeah, so let's get into my review of this here. Tribe of the Accord by Shaun Michael Stone is a high fantasy, it's also kind of like a prehistoric fantasy, survival, a little bit of coming of age and a YA type story. And so there's a lot of the generic young adult fantasy tropes that come along with that age range and that genre to some degree. But yeah, so Tribe of the Accord is the first book in the Tribe Chronicles. From best I can tell, there's supposed to be more books. I presume this will be a series at some point, but for now, there is just the one book, at least last time I checked, which was I don't remember how long ago it was that I wrote this review, but it wasn't that long ago. But anyways, this story tells the tale of a girl named Adira as she is on a bit of a coming of age journey where she has to learn to survive, to grow, to develop skills, and to find her own strengths. Although this story falls into many of the common fantasy tropes, it also does something very unique and feels distinctly different. I should also mention that I was sent this book by the author in exchange for an honest review. And so I want to make sure that I mention that, even though it doesn't influence my review at all. I just want to make sure that I mention that that was the case. Before I get into the main body of this review, though, I just quickly like to say welcome to an Erudite adventure. I'm T. If you're liking what you're seeing from us, please like, comment, and subscribe. I don't remember when I actually received this book, but at this point it was definitely a long time ago, a while ago, and it took me far too long to actually get to it. I can make all sorts of excuses, but it comes down to the fact that I read very slowly. Okay, I read physically very slowly, and so I was not taking the time to sit down and read it like I needed to. I'm glad that I finally did actually get to it, and I'm actually very glad that I finally got to it for a couple of reasons. One, because I needed to get to it, but also I actually ended up enjoying it. I ended up really enjoying my time reading this book, and so that's a good thing for sure. And it was one of the first books that I'd physically gotten through in quite a while, and so it was nice to read this book and get it off my shelves, or it's still on my shelves, but to get it off my unread pile and actually go into be a book that I have already read. So I started to mention it already, but this book has a little bit of a unique setting, one that I can't really say that I've ever seen before, or at least not exactly like this. It's kind of a prehistoric Stone Age type story, while also being fantasy. It's not huge. It's not terribly heavy on magic, at least not that I remember, and it is a distinctly secondary world. It's written for a younger audience, somewhere closer to YA than middle grade, so definitely an older audience than middle grade, but it's still, I wouldn't quite consider it adult fantasy. But as I've long asserted, books written for younger audiences should absolutely be enjoyable to an older audience, to adults as well. And this one absolutely does that, in my opinion. It doesn't really reinvent the wheel by any means, but it does capitalize well on a lot of the tropes that it uses. One of the things I did notice almost immediately is that this feels a lot like a video game, and that's not in the way of like progression fantasy or lit RPG or anything like that. It's just the setting and the way that the story is told reminds me of being in a video game. And this is far from a negative, and I'd argue that it's actually intentional, seeing as the author based the story off of a game he had built. There are for sure some things that read a little bit like game mechanics, or things that would only happen in a video game. But with that being said, I was easily able to set aside some of the minor critiques I might have had I not known that that was the case. And it really didn't affect the story negatively at all. In fact, I felt like those moments, I felt like I was kind of almost like I was watching cutscenes from a video game type thing, which is kind of fun. It's kind of fun to encounter that sort of stuff in a book, because that's not something that I'm used to. And so I definitely don't think it affected the story negatively by any means. There were a handful of times where I felt like events were proceeding a little bit too fast, but overall the pace of the story was good. I was invested in the story fairly early on, and I enjoyed learning about the world. I think that it's cool. It's kind of a very pretty world. Of course, the cover is beautiful, and that informs your interpretation of the world quite a bit, which is what a cover is kind of intended to do. But also it's beautiful. But having that cover in my mind as I was reading the book, I got invested in this world. I had fun exploring the world because I could see how beautiful it was. Adira, though frustrating, hot-headed, and prideful, is actually a good protagonist to follow, and I didn't dislike her, even with those things that oftentimes do cause me to dislike a character. she had a good mix of strengths and flaws that made her feel like a real character and not just a caricature. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest strengths of this book, is seeing Adira as a real character, one with flaws that she needs to improve, and also one with strengths that are not as strong as she thinks, and so she needs to develop those even further, but they're a good starting point for her and for her character journey. So it definitely was impressed with the character writing for Adira here. Overall, I enjoyed this book a fair amount and could see myself recommending it to the right readers. Plus, you can really never go wrong with a beautiful cover. As I already mentioned, I do think this is a beautiful, very atmospheric and immersive cover. It just pulls you right into the world very well. So yeah, that is my review of Tribe of the Accord by Shaun Michael Stone. I had the opportunity to read another book, whether that was because I bought it or I was sent it or something like that. I probably would read another book in this series and by this author. I enjoyed it well enough to do that for sure. So yeah, definitely one that I could recommend to many readers, but it would probably be a little bit more curated than just my throw it at the wall and hope somebody likes it type reviews. But yeah, anyways, that's my review of Tribe of the Accord by Shaun Michael Stone. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday and have our social medias linked in the description down below. We'll see you guys again soon. Stay warm.